All right, so now it's time we actually create our first API view. That is, we are going to create a view that's related to a lot of our other views, but in particular for our API. And that means we're going to have to do a few things prior to actually jumping into it. And one of those things is we want to talk about essentially where we're going. Now, what an API will do is turn your data or the data flow from just regular Django models into JSON objects. So this JSON object can be passed back and forth. That means when we want to actually change a model or create one, we can send JSON data. If we want to retrieve it, we'll get back JSON data. And JSON data is very useful inside of a web application, but it's also very useful inside of like iOS or Android. So basically, this is a standard data format that's going to allow us to work with all those other things. And that's what our API is going to be all about. And that's what the Django REST framework is all about for the most part. There are other kinds of data formats, but JSON is the most popular. And of course, that is JSON. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Now, our goal here is just like our goal before. We still want to go back to that CRUD principle. That is, create, retrieve, update, and delete. We still want to be able to make new posts. We want to be able to retrieve the posts. We want to be able to update them, and we want to be able to delete them. Now, in many applications, you might just want to retrieve, but we're going to go through each step so you can figure out what it is that you want. For a blog in particular, your API will probably be more likely to have something like retrieve, so list, search, get, the detail view, all of those things, right? Because a blog, if you are the manager of the blog, you can just have one place, such as the admin or what we've already built, as your main part to actually creating stuff. But that's just for posts. We also have comments and accounts. So all of this CRUD stuff is going to make a lot more sense once we actually start building it. And then the next thing I want to do is create the API module inside of each app. Now, this is a stylistic thing, but it's something that I recommend you do because it separates your API from your regular Django project. Now, if you're using Django solely as an API service, then you wouldn't have to do it this way. But since we are going to do it this way. What am I talking about? Well, basically, whenever we want to add an API on top of any given app, we are going to put it into its own module, its own Python module. So inside of posts, we're going to come in here and we're going to create a new folder. Call that folder API, press enter. And then inside that folder, we're going to make a new file and we're going to call it init. So $init_init_.py. So that's underscore twice is what I mean by double underscore. So that just created a new Python module. So now inside of here, we can do all of the things that are related to the API for our blog. Again, this is a stylistic choice. You don't have to do it this way, but it is something that I like to do mainly because it really keeps it nice and clean. So everything that's related to the posts that is related to the API will be inside of that API module. So in this module, we're going to make a new one called views.py. So views.py is where we're going to hold our views to actually display data. So the first thing I want to do is a list view. So I'm actually going to list down all of the posts that we have. Now to do this, we're going to import from the rest_framework.generics. We're going to import the list API view. So the list API view. So let's actually take a look at this in the documentation. Inside of generic views, this is it right here. You can do it how they do, where they import generics and then do generic dot. I like being explicit and actually importing the actual class that we're going to be working with because you don't necessarily need to import all of them. And we're going to be working off the list API view. Now, it doesn't give you a whole lot of information here other than the examples at the very top, right? So basically what you have to look at here is we have a query set, we have serializer class, we have permission class, and we can also do authentication classes as well. So like who is authenticated and how you want this to be authenticated. That stuff we'll actually get into once it's necessary. But right now we're just really focusing on something basic here. So we're going to use the list API view. And for the list API view, we are going to be using class-based views. So class-based views are really, really valuable topics to go into We didn't go into it in Try Django 1.9 or Advancing the Blog, but we definitely have class-based view discussion on joincfe.com/projects. We have a full project for it. I believe there's about 24 videos. It really will help you learn and understand class-based views for a basic Django project. But since we're working in the REST framework, we have to use class-based views. We're not even going to use function-based views. I would say one caveat to that, you actually don't have to use class-based views, but that's what we're going to do from the get-go. So if you do have questions on class-based views, please hang on to them until you watch the class-based view project, because again, we're not going into the actual old views from the post themselves. If this is something you guys really want to see, let us know, because it could be its whole section in of itself. Anyways, now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and make our first view. And I'm going to go ahead and import from posts.models, import post. So post, of course, is the model that we're going to be working with. And of course, if you open up model, you'll see that. So we're going to make our first view by using ListView. You might be wondering, why is it that we did from posts.models? Well, you could also do from .models, from .models. That will actually bring you back into post as well. But I'm just going to be explicit and say from post, as in the app posts.models, import post. All right, so we'll do class. Again, it's a class-based view. We will do post list API view. And of course, it takes in list API view, inherits everything from list API view. And then we'll just say query set equals to post.objects.all. So this is on the basic core as to what we're going to be doing here. Since we are, again, working in the API, I'm going to, we don't want that. We're going to also make a urls.py. And here, this should feel very familiar to a post model, or the post app itself. So when we created that post app, we did a view and we also created URLs for it. So we're going to do that same thing inside of the API module. We're going to paste this in, and I'm going to get rid of all of these old views. And of course, we can comment these things out because they will become relevant again in the future. So that means that we are going to be working off of a very similar pattern. And notice we're doing .views. Of course, it's going off of API views. If you did post.api.views, that would also work. But we want to import our view specifically that we just created, which was the post list API view. So let's go ahead and import that. And we're going to change our old post list to the post list API view. And then you're going to do .as view. This is the method that you have to use when it comes to using a class-based view. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's go ahead and add this urls.py to our actual blog project. So we're going to click on blog into URLs. And now what we're going to do is we had posts URL. I'm going to go ahead and copy that one actually, paste below it, and I'm going to do API/posts and then slash. So this is coming off of just API posts. And then this is posts.api.urls and then posts-API. So we are following a very similar pattern that we've seen before, but this is just a little bit cleaner. And that's why I did that other module, because if you didn't do the other module, then you might get a little confused with what URLs and where you're going, where now I have just the API starting off the URL. So we know that if the endpoint or the URL is ever API, then that's what it's going to be. I did a slight little mistake. We want to actually have the caret right there, not at the end. Okay, so regular expressions, that's just signifying this is the beginning of the string itself. And then if we look at the URL for the post API, we've got that list there. So let's go ahead and navigate to that and see what happens. So we log in here and we go to and then we go to API posts, press enter. We now get this API view should have a serializer class. This is a good place to stop because we actually need to talk about serializers. So what we've done so far is we created an API module and we created a view for that API module as well as the URLs. The view essentially will give us a list view, which is a query set of some kind. The nice thing about this query set is we can actually customize how that works by just overriding define get query set. And this is something that we will definitely talk about in the future. But there are methods like that that will allow us to update how this view comes in based on who's requesting it and all that. Okay, so we're going to stop now. And in the next one, we're going to talk about serializers. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, let's keep going.